In other head coaching news, Nick
Nick
Nurse.
Nurse is going to Philadelphia. Now, this is an interesting hire because if you've ever listened to Joel Embiid, who's played the Raptors twice in the playoffs, he's very often complained about double teams from Nick Nurse. Well, Nick Nurse has complained to the officials about Joel Embiid. So they now team up with Daryl Morey, who assigned Nick Nurse as the former Rockets G League coach years ago, or maybe it was Summer League. I don't know about you guys. I think Nick Nurse has a case of being a top 3 coach in the league. I still don't think this is going to move the needle for the 76ers. A team that this year had the highest net rating in the NBA in clutch minutes, above the second and third best teams, the Denver Nuggets and the Miami Heat. It feels like the 76ers have a blueprint with Joel Embiid, who stylistically is completely different than the bigs Nick Nurse has had the last 3-4 years in Toronto. I mean, like Chris Boucher, Jakob Poeltl. The 76ers, though, to me, I think at this point might just be a lost cause. I don't know if an elite head coach is going to shift the makeup of this roster, because what kind of matters more is what happens with James Harden this offseason. And I felt like signing or hiring Nurse marked the end of James Harden's days in Philadelphia. Because if they wanted to really go all into extending Harden to this max contract that I'm pretty confident the Rockets are intending to offer him, I think they would have hired Mike D'Antoni here. That to me would have been the wrong decision. But at the same time, would keeping Harden raise this team's chances of actually making it to the third round of the playoffs? Or is it better off to hire Nurse, lose Harden, flip Tobias Harris into who knows what, and then kind of like take it from there? Where really what I'm getting at here is Nick Nurse going to get this team to the third round of the playoffs or not?
That's a great question, because I think questions loom. Like you said, if James Harden ends up leaving Philadelphia, what's going to happen with Joel Embiid? Is he next? Is he going to be the one requesting a deal? Is he going to request a trade out to another place? It's possible. Now, to touch on Nick Nurse, I'll be honest with you. I know a lot of people praise him to be a great coach, and while he's a good one, I must say, kind of overrated, though, in my eyes. For the simple fact that, I felt like he was playing in an Eastern Conference where he was just lucky LeBron wasn't there. I think they just took advantage of that. I even heard, I think it was Stephen A. Smith talking about it. I could be wrong. And it really rings true that he walked into an Eastern Conference, one, with LeBron gone, and then two, Dwayne Casey had just won Coach of the Year, won 50-plus games with this Raptors team. So he inherited a great squad, minus DeMar DeRozan, and plus Kawhi Leonard. I think you make that deal 10 times out of 10. I think he just lucked into the easiest road in the Eastern Conference right there. And it took a big-time shot by Kawhi Leonard to also get him there. But I don't know. That's just neither here nor there.
Here's what I want to combat your point real quick. Nurse was a 5-year assistant for the Raptors that worked closely with Fred VanVleet, Jonas Valanciunas, and Pascal Siakam before he was assigned the head coach duties. So I feel like in that finals run, it wasn't just Kawhi Leonard, but it was the development of all the players around him, plus Ibaka and Gasol at the end. And even Serge Ibaka, he goes to Toronto and he becomes an elite three-point shooter. I think that Nick Nurse had planted the seeds as an assistant, and that was what made him a very appealing candidate in the first place back 4 years ago.
Okay, what kind of noise has he made since?
The year after Kawhi Leonard left, they go to the NBA bubble, and that season in 2020, without Kawhi, they played at a 59-win pace. That was with Pascal Siakam making an All-NBA team. He played poorly in the bubble, and even with Pascal not playing particularly well, they took the Boston Celtics to the ringer in the Game 7 of the second round of the playoffs. They could have went to the finals if they beat the Celtics that year. Ultimately, we'll never know because they got knocked out in the second round. But for Kawhi to leave and you win more games, you play at a higher win pace the following year, that to me is pretty incredible for a guy that maximized his roster better than any other coach in the league could have, minus maybe Spo. Maybe Spo.
I just never view the Raptors, at least since Kawhi left, as a legit competitor. There's nobody that's afraid of them. And Maybe that's not attributed to Nick Nurse. Maybe that's just more on the roster. But I don't view the Raptors as anything so special. So I can't go out there and say, oh, he's the needle mover now for the Philadelphia 76ers. I can't. Because if Doc Rivers couldn't do it, who, while granted his playoff problems, Doc Rivers wasn't the problem in Philadelphia. Other people
Right.
didn't show up. People didn't step up to the plate. You
Sure.
can't rely on the coach with everything. So I don't think that he's the needle mover, and I think Philadelphia has a lot of questions to ask, because if you're not keeping James Harden, now you question about Joel Embiid. What else are you going to do if Embiid stays, Harden goes? Who do you surround him with to put out a championship contender? Because guess what? Year after year, Joel Embiid is not getting any younger. He's getting older. I think he's 30 already.
He's turning 30 next
Turning
March.
30 days. So he's turning 30 for the next season. Sorry, I don't think
So, I think you guys are both right in certain points, right? I've been a Nick Nurse fan. I believe if he's not number 5 in the league, he's right around there. I agree with John. Like, Nick would have been could he have done this? I don't know. I feel like maybe only Ty Lue and
Spo.
Popovich, and obviously Spo could do what Spo is doing right now. But yeah, again, Justin's right also in terms of he did inherit a very good team. That sounds a little familiar to a Steve Kerr situation, but we still give Steve Kerr his credit and his due. Obviously, Nick Nurse hasn't had the sustained success that Steve Kerr has had, but yeah, I obviously give Kawhi Leonard much more of the credit for that championship run, because you guys know my feelings on Kawhi Leonard. I believe he was on pace to become the best player in the world and take the throne from LeBron before injuries derailed his career, which is very sad. But Nick, for me, after Kawhi left, again, I agree with Justin. I never saw the Raptors as a real threat. They just weren't they weren't a threat without Kawhi. Before Kawhi, they weren't a threat after Kawhi. And we even had this conversation before the season started this year or last year with John, and he was, really high on the Raptors. And me and Justin actually together, we were telling him there's no threat here, man. They're not going to be. And lo and behold, they didn't make the playoffs. So yeah, I like the move for Nick Nurse going to the 76ers. James Harden, obviously, he's not going to be a plus. He's gone. I think he's going to go to Houston, kind of spend the rest of his career in, hate to say it, but mediocrity. Philly, I think the best course of action is obviously try and get rid of Tobias and get the best you can get for him. I've heard, there's rumors that they kind of want to make a deal with to get Fred VanVleet over. They just need to make some moves. They've got a good team. They've got a pretty deep team as well, like Melton coming off the bench and those other guys that are escaping me right now. Milton, he's lesser extent, but their team is solid, right? I just was never a believer in James Harden. That was my main issue, and that's why I was like, well, if I'm not the biggest believer in Joel Embiid, mostly because of his health, you add James Harden, and now he's going to have to take on more of a responsibility. I mean, you can completely miss me with that, and he did completely miss me with that, and he also missed the rim a bunch of times.
Or the net, more vividly.
And the net, he actually,
the bottom
he hit the rim, he just couldn't hit the bottom of the net. Yeah, the bottom of the net. But yeah, getting rid of Harden, I'm now more of a believer in the Philadelphia 76ers, because you got rid of a guy who I believe is a consistent playoff choker for his entire career. That's not an insult. That's a fact of life. Go back and look at the numbers and look at the tape. So I am more of a believer in the Philadelphia 76ers now, but they have to make some moves, obviously, to enter that echelon. I still believe the Bucks, even though Miami is making this incredible run right now, I don't know if it's sustainable for another year. I really don't. I would love to believe it. I would love to hope, but a lot of things did go our way, and a lot of things are hitting the right way for this Miami Heat team to get to where they are. I'm not going to be, a liar to you and say they're not. Things had to go our way a lot of the times. But Philly can easily make a couple of moves and they can be right there. They're still a top 4 team in the East going into next year, though. So I like the move. Nick Nurse is a very good head coach. It's very interesting, though, that he turned down apparently the Suns and Bucks job for this job. So I don't know what that tells you, but
I think what it tells us is that he wanted to work with Daryl Morey, who's,
Yeah, that's
even if you think he has done a great job in Philly, the reality is he's done a much better job than his predecessor in Elton Brand. James Harden has a $35 million player option this offseason. Should Philadelphia? No, because it's a player option, John. Would Philadelphia be better off if he walks and they replace him with a guy who's now linked them with Nick Nurse coming in, Fred VanVleet?
yeah, 100%. Yeah. James Harden's it's another thing about addition by subtraction. You get rid of a guy who is a known playoff choker. You get in a guy who can, who's scrapped and clawed and will fight you to the bitter end.
I don't agree. I don't agree.
You could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you could add Fred VanVleet and then add a guy that might shoot 20% from the field. That's not okay. So let's not forget that James Harden. I think you guys simply forget, and a lot of people forget.
Who forgets? What do I forget, Justin? Please explain to me what I have forgotten about James Harden.
Yes. You could point out all the playoff problems. That's fine. But 2 of those wins against the Boston Celtics in that series were largely in part due to what James Harden is capable of. And I really think if you let that go, now granted, yes, they're not guaranteed a spot in the 3rd round with or without Harden, but he sure does increase your chances to get there. So if you subtract him, I don't think Philadelphia is a top 4 team in the East. If you take James Harden off that team, that is not the same squad. You're losing a super playmaker. The guy he led the league in assists.
Oh, I'm not taking it. Yeah, he did turn the ball over. He does turn the ball over at an insanely rate too.
Well, actually, this year he averaged a low since 2014, 3.4 turnovers per contest.
That's still a lot. That's low for his range, but that's still a lot. But listen, Maxey would be taking over his spot, and a lot of people are high on Maxey. Obviously not as a playmaker, just taking more of a role as that second scoring option. A lot of people are high on Maxey. He is a young player. Like I said, Tobias has got to be moved. I just don't think he fits anymore. And then you obviously are going to replace Harden. But, yeah, I do think that they are still a top 4, if you want to call it 5 in the East, yes, because this East is not super stacked. It is open. And there's teams that are still trying to take steps too. Like the Cavaliers are still trying to take steps. Your Knicks are still trying to take steps. You guys still have to make moves too.
But you see, those are 2 teams that I'm already catapulting above the Philadelphia 76ers if you're taking James Harden out. And already, no Knicks fan was afraid of the Philadelphia 76ers.
You don't have to be afraid of nothing. You were going to lose.
Well, they've been just as far as the Sixers in the playoffs with 1 year of Jalen Brunson. Now, here's the thing. People may be high on Tyrese Maxey as not the lead guard.
No.
I hate to be the guy. Tyrese Maxey will not be a lead guard. He's in his age 22 season, elite shooter, elite finisher. I think he's great as a secondary compliment. But every year in the playoffs, if he is as good as everybody makes him out to be, and shout out to a couple of people, really smart people out there, I've heard he's better than Cade Cunningham, which, yes, maybe in Cade's rookie year, but in a year he won't be. I think Tyrese Maxey's overrated because in the playoffs, when the 76ers are looking for somebody to deliver, yes, highly efficient, 20-point per game score, but in those biggest moments, he shows you he's not a reliable shot creator in isolation, and as a playmaker, he is a secondary complement. And I think if you're Philadelphia, as Justin said very well, to lose James Harden is putting too much on Tyrese Maxey's plate, asking him to play a role and be a player that he's not equipped to be. And if you add in Fred VanVleet, he is very redundant with Tyrese Maxey. He's a better defender, but he's also not an elite level playmaker or distributor in pick and roll. He struggles at the rim, and for mid-range, he doesn't get a shot off well at 6 foot. He's a high-volume three-point shooter that is designed to be a third guard, whether in the starting lineup or off the bench. I think if you're Philadelphia, you may be able to trade Tobias Harris and you get back in return a max player, but that max player is going to be a Jordan Poole and Anthony Simons, guards who are also poor defenders and are kind of redundant with Maxey as well. I don't know next year if you can roll into the season with the backcourt of Jordan Poole and Tyrese Maxey. and expect this team to be better because I think they do the same things. And neither one of those two brings what you'll lose in Harden, which is an elite level playmaker and pick and roll cog to pair alongside Embiid. So, no, I think the 76ers next season are better off if James Harden's here on a 2+1 contract. A 4-year deal is terrible down the line because I don't think he's going to age particularly well at 37 years old. But for this upcoming season, which hell could be the last of Joel Embiid's prime, we don't know when he's going to break down because it's honestly a miracle he's become a 2-time MVP from a health standpoint. There's not many years left here in Philadelphia. And if you want to win a championship, I think your best odds, yeah, they're with the biggest playoff underperformer of the last decade on your side.
Yeah,
of all time. Hell, maybe all time.
Arguably all time, yeah. I don't know. Maybe there's a trade out there where you add Maxey with Tobias Harris and get even better player. I don't know. But the Sixers are going to make moves, and we'll just see what's out there for them. Yeah, I'm not a big believer in the Sixers. I'm just saying they're a top 4 team.